Hello, everyone. My name is Mike Mai. Welcome to my talk, Tiny CSS Big Impact. Today, I'll be walking you through more than a dozen CSS techniques that will help you create minimal and accessible websites. First, for those who don't know me, I am a designer coder. I work for a creative agency called Code and Theory. I build design systems and I set up typography for a lot of client websites. And I am also the subject matter expert on accessibility here at the agency. I yell a lot when I review accessibility. I'm sure a lot of us do. And then aside from my professional job, I also make a lot of websites for myself as well. I have created many CSS projects over the years. A few of them are CSS frameworks focused on minimalism. Oh, just a little warning, the next few slides will have some scrolling. In 2017, with a passion for typography, I created typesetting CSS. It is a glorified CSS reset, which I style many semantic HTML elements based on my opinions about typography. To this date, I still use this framework for my personal blog. Then in 2021, I did the same exercise again, but with modern CSS. I gave myself the strict rules of black and white only, no 50 shades of gray, no custom fonts, no classes, and super minimal CSS was born. Then a couple years after that, I iterated further and created MCSS using only system fonts designed by the typographer named Matthew Carter, who is my hero. This one doesn't even have one line of CSS declaring text color and background color. It relies a lot on browser defaults. So through building all of these different frameworks, I mastered the art of writing less damn code. The overfile size went from 38 kilobytes in 2017 to 10 kilobytes in 2023. And I also learned a few tiny tricks that would improve accessibility drastically. So before we dive into tiny CSS, what do you think is even smaller than tiny CSS? Anyone in the audience want to take a guess? I can pick Steve.
Micro CSS.
Pretty good guess. The answer is nothing. Literally nothing. Sometimes the best CSS are the ones you don't write. So let's take a look at what I mean by that. Take the base font size, for example. The browser already sets the default on the HTML level at 100%, which is the equivalent of 16 pixels. For a majority of websites, the body text is 16 pixels. This means you don't need to explicitly declare a font size in your CSS. The benefit of using the browser default is that it respects the user preferences. The relative value here allows the user to change the browser's font size setting to display text at a size that is comfortable to them. Here is a demonstration of changing Chrome's font size setting. Without writing a line of CSS for the page, it just works. The text can get very small or very large at the user's demand. Here is a fruity website which shall not be named. It does not work at all with this Chrome setting. And guess what? They hard-coded the base font size to an absolute pixel value rather than keeping it relative and letting the browser do the work. Had they studied how browsers handle base font size or read about Adrian's post, the ultimate ideal bestest base font size that everyone is keeping a secret, especially Shad, their fruity website would be more accessible. So Adrian elaborates on this a lot more. Be sure to check it out. Many experts, including myself, have commented on the blog post. You can learn even more about font size by reading the comments. Another thing that the browser does for you is color. If you are designing in black and white, like I am most of the time, you can absolutely not declare any colors in your CSS. By default, the text is black and the background is white. On this page, I have declared color, text color, background color, border color. When I remove all of these colors, nothing changes. Any styles that the browser already declared, you don't have to declare again. Also, browser makers rely on the true power of CSS, the cascade. If certain properties are set at the root level, they would cascade to all elements. That's why if you want to have a border that's the same color as the text color, you don't have to explicitly write out the color. It already inherits the text color by default. Like in this example here, the border property is only defined as 2 pixels solid. The color keyword is omitted. This is something that website makers should take note, because many sites out there declares color on every single element, completely ignoring the cascade. I'm not saying this is wrong. I'm just saying they don't understand CSS, which stands for cascading style sheet. The cascade allows you to write a lot less code. Less code means better performance, which leads to easier access for people with slow internet. But some people just love to fix the thing rather than learn the thing. Sorry for the rant. Let's dive into tiny CSS. First up, let's expand on not declaring any colors. Typically, you have to do something like this. Declare the light mode colors, and then within a color scheme media query, declare the dark mode colors. This is accessible, this works, but too much code for my liking, and I don't want to declare colors, like I said previously. I just want to use system colors. With modern CSS, I can just use the color scheme property. So instead of writing all that code you see previously, you can just write this one line of CSS. By including both the dark and light keywords in this color scheme property, it will make your website compatible in both light and dark modes. It automatically changes text color, background color, and UI colors based on the user preferences. All the colors are set by the browser and overall very accessible. In this example, you can see a comparison between light mode and dark mode in the Chrome browser. And we can cross-browser test dark mode to see how accessible it is. The page renders pretty much the same with white text, dark gray background, and blue accent color on inputs across 3 browsers, the Chrome, Safari, and Firefox. The noticeable difference is that Chrome uses a very dark gray, while Safari and Firefox use a shade lighter. These system colors look great to me, so I don't mind designing with them most of the time. One line of CSS gives me both light and dark modes, I'll take it. Beyond text and background colors, sometimes you want to customize UI colors as well. You might be thinking, I'll just change the background color of some UI elements, like what you see on the screen here. Well, this is actually not valid CSS. It's not this easy. If you were to customize all of these UI elements, it would probably require 100 lines of code. But that's old news. With modern CSS, you only need 1 line. It is the accent color property. Declare it globally on the page, and all UI elements will take on a color of your choice. You can see in this demo, I am changing the accent color to the colors of the rainbow. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue. Any color you want. In case I was moving too fast, let me slow it down to show this. This CSS property is actually wicked smart. The accent color doesn't just change part of the UI, the whole thing changes. Yellow is a bright color, so the check mark in this example is black, and the track on the range input and progress bar is dark gray. However, green is a dark color, so the check mark in the checkbox is white, and the track on the range input and progress bar is also white. No single color is accessible by itself. The fact that this CSS property changes the color pairings in UI elements is just awesome. Sufficient color contrast is automatic. Earlier, I said border color inherits text color, and that's the case for most things. But not for SVGs, because SVGs use the fill property rather than the color property. If you add SVG icons to your website and you want them to match the text color, you would have to explicitly declare the fill color using the keyword current color. Here I have added some SVG code into the page next to a piece of text. A lot of times when designers save SVGs out of design tools, the SVGs would have a hard-coded fill color, which might not match the text color on the page. In this case, the SVG I added has a black fill. Not very accessible against a dark background, is it? Now let me reset the fill to current color. So I set fill equals current color in the CSS, and there, much better. Now the icon is also taking on the same color as the text, which is white. Next, a trick for Windows high contrast mode, which is renamed to contrast themes in Windows 11. The force colors media query allows you to declare CSS specifically for contrast themes. Now, how does this help with accessibility? More often than not, buttons are designed with a border. When a contrast theme is enabled, it would be really hard to tell buttons apart from plain text. Pay attention to the calls to action on this site, which shall not be named. The black one has no border. The white one uses box shadow instead of border. When contrast theme is enabled, the calls to action on this site, which shall not be named, completely blended with the background. You cannot see the button boundaries anymore because contrast theme sets every element to the same background color. Decorative gradients and box shadows are removed, and elements with borders would get higher contrast borders. But if the element has no border to begin with, it would not get a high contrast border. So you can see with these CTAs, because they were not coded with borders to begin with, they kind of just got lost. They became something that looks like plain text rather than a button. But adding a border to all buttons through the force color media query would fix it nicely. Like in this example, I'm writing the media query force colors and setting it to active. If that condition is true, I want the button to have a border of 1 pixel solid. In this demo, I'm using the Chrome DevTools to emulate force colors, so it would be the same as turning on Windows high contrast mode on a Windows machine. Once I added the CSS inside the media query, this red button here without a border would have a border in force colors mode. Very nice. Another media query that can help with accessibility is the prefers reduce transparency. Now, another question for the audience. Can anyone guess what I could use this for? Anyone want to take a guess? All right, I will reveal it. Yes, that's right. The new design aesthetics, liquid ass. Nope, I mean liquid glass. If this trend catches on, a lot of websites would become even more inaccessible. This media query could at least provide a way for users to turn off the glass effects on demand. The prefers reduced transparency media query can detect if a user has enabled a setting on their device to reduce the transparent or translucent layer effects used on the device. If the transparent glass effects were written inside such media query, it would only display the effects to users who are okay with transparency. Like in this example, I have my system settings open up, and I went to the accessibility panel and I turn on the reduced transparency option under display. Now, this turns the entire page into a version that has less transparency. So what you were seeing before with the glassy effect now is much more high contrast. It's not as transparent as before. And that one line of media query takes care of it, helping the user to get rid of that glassy effect if they don't want it. So bye-bye liquid glass. Staying with the liquid glass maker for a hot minute. If you're designing with system UI fonts, such as San Francisco, you might notice that the font is not very accessible by default. The uppercase I looks too similar to the lowercase l, and the number 0 looks too much like a capital O. However, the font was designed to be accessible, so what gives, right? Turns out you have to explicitly turn on a font setting to make it more accessible. Using the font feature settings property and setting it to SS06 along with San Francisco will enable a more distinct uppercase I, lowercase l, and a slash inside the number 0. Now be mindful that this font feature only works with San Francisco. The keyword might be different for another font. So if you're using another font, you should probably check on that font and see which font feature enables this kind of setting. Now let's look at text wrapping. As a typography snob, widows are my biggest pet peeve, but modern CSS can eliminate them. The text wrap property enhances the visual presentation of text elements, allowing headings and paragraphs to have better readability. In this demo, I am setting the balanced text wrap for the heading and the pretty text wrap for the paragraph. Balance helps long headings to have even line length on each line, and pretty makes sure a word is not left all by itself on a line. Setting these prevents large amount of empty space caused by lonely single words, which distracts the reader's eye. This will improve the natural rhythm of the text. So you can see in this example, the heading text, once it's set to text wrap balance, it tries to even out the text in the 2 lines. And then when the paragraph is set to text wrap pretty, it will try to remove that widow at the end of the paragraph. Try to have 2 words instead of 1 word at the last line. The natural rhythm of the text also has to take localization into consideration, because different languages might require different writing direction. You can have the text flow left to right when the language reads right to left or other directions. The old way of absolute directional keywords such as top, right, bottom, left requires a lot of overrides for various reading directions. Such as in this example, I have to override the padding and the text align for right to left languages. This is where logical properties and units come in. Instead of left and right, think inline. Instead of top and bottom, think block. Instead of height, think block size. Instead of width, think inline size, and so on. Avoiding directional keywords in your CSS will allow the content to flow in any writing directions without any overrides. You're welcome. Your localization code just got cut in half. Here is a demonstration of logical properties allowing Chinese content to flow left to right, the modern way of writing, but it can also flow right to left vertically, the traditional way. And all of that is enabled by writing CSS without using any directional keywords and using only logical properties and units. To further ensure the flow of reading is not disrupted, you can also make media embeds responsive so they don't break the page layout. As an example here, setting images, SVGs, videos, iframe embeds to a max inline size of 100% and a block size of auto. What this does is if you have big images on a page and they don't fit by default, you can do that and allow the image to fit within the container it is in. So as you can see in this demo, once I set those two properties, the max inline size 100% and the block size auto, the image is fitting within the page container, and it is also resizing proportionally because block size is set to auto, keeping the aspect ratio of the original image. Now that we have taken care of design foundation, color, typography, and spacing, let's take a close look at interaction design. The cursor property can improve accessibility and usability. Changing the default cursor to the finger pointer will make it clear which elements are clickable. So in this case, I am setting the checkbox, radio, select input, label, and button to display the finger pointer. So you can see in this demo, once I set that cursor equals pointer, and I use my mouse to hover over any of these interactive elements, you can see the finger pointer instead of the default cursor. Now, this ensures that even if designers forget to design a hover state, the cursor change provides a sufficient baseline to indicate interactivity. Interactivity. That's the word. As for focus state, it is easy to create a focus outline using the text color. By targeting the focus visible pseudo, it tells the browser to only display the focus outline when the user uses the tab key on their keyboard. Then set the outline to 2 pixels solid. Note that the outline color inherits the text color, similar to how border property works. And then lastly, create a little bit of offset between the focus element and the focus outline, allowing the focus outline to be seen more clearly. Like in this example, I'm setting the outline to be 2 pixels solid, and it would take on the text color here. And then I'm setting the outline offset to 2 pixels. So as I tap through all of these interactive elements here, you can see these 2 pixel white outline surrounding the interactive elements, you can also see that 2-pixel offset to make sure that the outline is not touching the element it is focusing on. Now, there are other ways of creating focus outlines, but I find this to be very accessible and the simplest. Because if your text color passes color contrast, your focus outline automatically passes color contrast as well. Next, let's cover a couple things about reduce motion. Animations and transitions don't have to be inaccessible. We can use the media query prefers reduce motion to render motion only when the user wants it. So such as when they have their system setting inside their system setting and the reduce motion setting is not enabled. That means they're okay with motion. If they're not okay with motion, they would have enabled that in their system setting. So in this example, I have a button that moves down as the user clicks it. Now, even if I enable reduce motion, the button is still moving. This could be distracting for certain users. But you can easily fix this by wrapping the CSS in a media query, the prefers reduce motion media query. I use prefers reduce motion no preference here. The no preference keyword means the user has not explicitly turned on reduce motion. So what this means is if the user doesn't have reduce motion turned on, this CSS applies. So button active transform, translate white to 20%. That means moving the button down 20% when you click on it. Active is the split second of clicking on that button. So once that's contained within the media query, this button doesn't move anymore because in this case, I have reduced motion enabled. We can also apply the media query to smooth scrolling. For some users, smooth scrolling is a nice way to transition the anchor from one place to another, but for others, it might cause motion sickness. And then the next slide will have some scrolling going on as well. By declaring scroll behavior to be smooth, all anchors on the page creates a gradual, fluid animations as the content jumps. Wrapping this CSS in the prefers reduce motion media query will make sure that the animation is only available to users who want it. Others will just see an instant jump. Like in this case, once reduce motion is enabled, you click on a link, it just jumps down to that section rather than a smooth scrolling down to that section. To conclude my talk today, here is a quick tip on ARIA. When styling interactive elements, your first instinct might be to create modifier classes for each state. But if you're building with ARIA, then you don't really need to write modifier classes, because you can just use the ARIA attribute as the selector. In this example of me building an accordion using the ARIA expanded attribute, I'm setting the ARIA expanded attribute here as a selector. So based on whether the ARIA expanded attribute equals to true or false, I would write different CSS. So in this case, when ARIA expanded equals false, and the accordion content that follows this element with the ARIA expanded attribute, it would set to display none. So if the accordion is not expanded, it should not show any accordion content. Now, this gives you a way to not write a class if you don't need to, because you have to use this ARIA expanded attribute anyway. What's the point of writing a modified class? It's just gonna make your HTML more bloated. I like to keep my CSS clean and my HTML cleaner. And you will see a lot of these techniques if you inspect my websites on my personal domain. Now that's all I have today. Like I said, more than a dozen CSS techniques to make accessible and minimal website. So thank you for attending. I hope you learned something new and you can apply these tiny CSS tricks to design your websites as well. Thank you.